It's great to be here with Deputy Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and welcome to Brizzy, and to our candidate for the federal seat of Brisbane, Fiona McNamara. This is a beautiful part of Australia. We're here in the Botanic Gardens, the Brisbane River behind us. We've talked a lot in recent times about the management of our economy, and this is critical for the nation's future. To make sure that our economy remains strong, that we are protecting jobs and managing cost of living pressures for working families. The truth is that we face new economic challenges with the end of the mining boom. That means that we've got to ensure in the future we have a new way of not having all our eggs in one basket, a new way of diversifying the economy, broadening the economic base, building new industries, and driving that through a new national competitiveness agenda. If you're going to have an effective national competitiveness agenda, it depends on a whole bunch of different things. It depends upon your energy prices, it depends upon your labour force productivity, your business productivity, it depends on your approvals process to get projects going in a reasonable time, it depends on your skills, it depends on small business formation, and it depends on having world-class infrastructure. And that is part of the government's nation-building agenda. It's becoming doubly important for the future that we have the best infrastructure we can provide. That's why Albo, for example, has been around the country supporting the National Broadband Network. It will turbocharge productivity in the future, whether it's through small businesses or big, and overcome the tyranny of distance. I was asked this morning in my local community, how do we make sure that the best jobs will be available in Queensland in the future so that people just don't have to go down to Sydney and Melbourne to get the best possible jobs? Part of the answer lies in first-class modern infrastructure, a national broadband network that works. Of course, on top of that as well, we've got other infrastructure which is necessary to help our cities function, and public transport infrastructure is key to that. Albo has been in charge of nation building since the government was first formed. He's the Minister for Nation Building. He's passionate about it. He's around the country, on the job all the time. And we have deliberately decided as an Australian government to invest in this country's public transport infrastructure and its urban rail networks in particular. Here in Brisbane, those of you who have followed the debate closely in recent decades will know that there have been plans to build the Redcliffe rail link. This government's making that happen after decades and decades and decades of nothing ever happening. But we're also looking at the actual future of the inner city rail network as well. That's why we put forward Cross River Rail, a really important project for the future. It's about making sure that people can get to the city and back in a reasonable stretch of time so that they can attend to their family responsibilities but also get to their place of work. And this is a great project. It's a great project because of what it does for transport needs. It's a great project for what it does also for the needs of our businesses located in the city. But it's a great project also for the environment and a terrific project when it comes to the impact on jobs. This project alone, the Queensland Government told us early on, will be worth just under 6,000 direct and indirect jobs. Mr Newman's government seems to be quite happy laying 14,000 people off. We're on about putting 6,000 people on through this project. That's why it's so good. The disappointing thing for us is that despite having reached agreement just before the last budget for this project to proceed, the Liberal Party National Government in Queensland walked away from it because Tony Abbott said that a Liberal government will never fund urban rail networks. Urban rail networks are not something that he's going to pay any attention to or fund. Well, a lot of Australians live in cities. They are demanding to have decent public transport systems, not just for convenience, but to keep the economies going as well. And that's why this is such an important project. And so the coalition pulled the rug from under the funding. The Liberals, through their federal leadership, said, no way, Jose, that's the end of that. And guess who's going to suffer? The people of Brisbane. This project is essential for Brisbane's future. The rail network in Brisbane will be clogged by 2016 unless we build this cross-river link ring. It's going to help people on the north side, people on the south side as well. That's one part of economic management, making sure that we've got best infrastructure for the future to boost our productivity, to diversify the economy in the future and to deal with the new challenges coming out of it. I've noticed there have been a few other debates on the economy in the last day or so as well. And I think it's important we focus on those because in the last 24 hours people would be entitled to conclude that the Liberals' economic management credentials are now a shambles. We've had yesterday Mr Abbott's Treasury spokesman say that in fact we should not be in a position where interest rates are being cut, that's what he said. And today Mr Abbott fundamentally contradicts him and says that we should have an interest rate cut. Yesterday we had Mr Abbott's Treasury spokesman saying that the Liberal Party would not be producing a budget bottom line. And this morning we have Mr Abbott overriding him again and saying, yes, the Liberal Party will produce its own costings and savings. Well, can I say, if you've got the alternative Prime Minister and the alternative Treasurer within 24 hours having a fundamental public blue about interest rates policy and about the budget bottom line, this not only suggests they're in a shambles, but questions their fitness for office. These are serious matters. Interest rates policy as well as the budget bottom line. And I'd conclude on this. Why is the budget bottom line doubly important for Queensland? Because we've seen what the Queensland Liberal National Party government does with budget bottom lines. What they do is they go out there without prior announcement before an election, say they'll have a commission of audit, and they come in and they slash 14,000 jobs, 4,400 health workers, deep cuts to education and health, with no mandate to do so prior to the election. Mr Abbott, through his Treasury spokesman, says they've got $70 billion that they've got to cut in terms of jobs, health, education. Frankly, this is a huge question, not just for the country, but particularly for people in Queensland. What you've had with Mr Newman's Liberal National Party government in Queensland is merely the entree. With Mr Abbott, you get served the main course, which is slash and burn to job cuts, cuts to health, cuts to education. That's why projects like this are so important for the city's future, for productivity's future, but also for the future of jobs. Albert?
Thanks very much, Prime Minister. It's great to be back here. We were here in May after our budget with the then member for Griffith and the candidate for Brisbane. Still are, but you have a different title now, and so do I. And it's fantastic to be back here with you, Prime Minister, for my first event of this campaign. And I can't think of anything more important. We were here in May because we committed $715 million in partnership with the Queensland Government that was also to contribute $715 million to make sure that the Cross River Rail project went ahead to take 14,000 cars off Brisbane's roads to make sure that we could have new trains through Brisbane, not just benefiting Brisbane, but also, of course, benefiting the Gold Coast and benefiting the Sunshine Coast. 4 new railway stations here in Brisbane. A fantastic project that had been assessed by Infrastructure Australia as the #1 priority in the nation. Having a look at cost-benefit analysis, looking at what the benefit to the economy would be, what the benefit to jobs, what the social and environmental benefit would be. And guess what? This project came out #1. And that's why we got together with Queensland and negotiated out an agreement of $715 million from each level of government, and then an availability payment model into the future, mobilising private sector funds through superannuation or other areas to make sure this project got done. Because the Queensland Government itself says that this city will enter gridlock around 2016 if this project doesn't proceed. And that's why we were surprised. Not surprised by Tony Abbott, but surprised that the Queensland Government walked away from the arrangement. Since then, Minister Emerson and Premier Newman have tried to say there wasn't an arrangement. Well, today I can say that on the 21st of June, so just a bit over a month ago, Scott Emerson wrote to me as a result of the Australian and Queensland budgets and said the following. Until speaking about the issue that they say is getting in the way, that is the carve up of GST, where this treatment, we were asked to treat this project the same as Bruce Highway funding the same as the Ipswich motorway, the same as every other infrastructure project going ahead. But he said this: I asked that the $100 million of savings that was previously agreed to be set aside for this project be quarantined for redirection to other priority projects within Queensland. Mr Emerson with this letter is confirming that not only did we have an agreement, we had an absolute profile of when the funding would commence, with $100 million in 2012-13 to make sure that this project could be turbocharged, because it is an urgent project for Queensland. But why is this amongst the important infrastructure priorities? This election on September 7 will be about a range of differences between the government and the coalition. There is no more stark contrast than when it comes to infrastructure. Labor's plan to invest according to cost-benefit analysis, according to advice from Infrastructure Australia, in projects such as this, as well as road projects. The Coalition's plan that dismisses any funding for public transport whatsoever. What that does is consign people to spending more time in their cars than at home with their families and their kids, or in their workplaces. What that does is reject the Infrastructure Australia model. So at the next election on September 7, anyone who supports funding for urban public transport should vote Labor. It's one of the real differences at this election, along with the very different plans for what we need with the national broadband network, as opposed to the opposition's flawed broadband plan. Infrastructure will be a key at this election. Public transport is front and centre when it comes to the differences between the government and the coalition, and I don't understand the intransigence. One of Mr Abbott's heroes, Margaret Thatcher, said, if you find yourself on a bus when you've hit the age of 27, you can consider your life to be a failure. Well, I don't have that elitist view. I understand that public transport is important in our cities. The Prime Minister understands it, and so does every Labor candidate.
And just to conclude, before taking your questions, the bottom line is this: our new approach to the future is an NBN for the future. The other lot are saying they'll disconnect the NBN. Our approach, a new approach to the future, is we as an Australian government will help invest in our major cities' urban transport needs. What they are saying is that they won't. There is a clear contrast in our approaches to this, and I believe the Australian people will think very carefully about who they trust, not just with the future management of our economy, which I've touched on this morning, but also the delivery of the infrastructure we need for the future, new infrastructure for Australia's new needs. Over to you, folks.